to episode 11 of our CRICKETish Social Isolation Vodcast. And by the magic of green screen this week, we're being transported to yet another beautiful ground where we wish we were going to be in person, but can't be. So guess the ground and guess the year?
If you want.
Okay, it's been a little bit of a quieter week this week, Syd, I feel. Obviously, the biggest event of the week in international sporting terms was the CRICKETish Cup final, which was played on Monday evening between Durham and Surrey. And Durham eventually won, I think it was by 2 runs in the end, and it came down to the final ball. So a brilliantly exciting occasion. Congratulations to Durham. How did you think that the CRICKETish Cup went in the end, Syd?
I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm well aware that there were some players who looked at it and went, "Why on earth are these strange people running this strange virtual cricket competition? Are they mad?" But the purpose was to kind of keep the cricket in the public eye, and to keep the players in the public eye, and to get be able to mention some players and talk about some cricket, and it achieved that. So I'm happy with it. We enjoyed doing it. It was a bit of fun and served its purpose.
Okay. And our many viewers of this podcast and followers on Twitter will obviously be very curious, and we have been asked, how does the software actually work? And you were you're the brains behind that software, so would you like to fill people in?
Oh, God knows how it works, Raf.
You wrote it?
Yeah, no, I wrote a piece of software to simulate a cricket match, basically. So it goes through a match ball by ball. So it takes each over as it comes, each ball as it comes, and each ball has an outcome. There might be a wicket, there might be some runs, there might be leg byes or what have you. And then it bowls the next ball, and at the end of 20 overs or 50 overs, if you choose that, it puts down a result. And in order to support that and to make it like a little bit more realistic, what we did was we went through and entered all the stats from the Women's County Championship with things like the bowler's strike rates and the batsman's average, and that feeds into the chances of anything happening on any particular ball. So if a bowler's got a very high strike rate, they've got a greater chance of taking a wicket on each ball. If a batsman's got a high average, they've got a greater chance of scoring more runs off each ball and that kind of thing. So yeah.
So it was reasonably sophisticated, although maybe not quite as sophisticated as some people thought, because we had some great tweets, people saying things like, typical Danny Wyatt dismissal, getting caught for when she stood in single figures kind of thing. And I just thought that was quite funny, because obviously the software doesn't quite go that far.
No, it's not that sophisticated, unfortunately.
That was just coincidence, but well done, Danny Wyatt, or virtual Danny Wyatt. Anyway, you're going to be selling it, Syd? You're going to be making an absolute mint of money?
Oh yeah, I'm going to become the Bill Gates of virtual cricket software, Raf. I'm plotting my path to the top even as we speak.
Great. Well, watch this space for more information on how Syd becomes a multi-millionaire. The other thing that the kind of piece of news we've had this week is from Cricket Australia. They've actually announced a full summer schedule for their summer, so that will be...
Hang on, Raf. Can I do my impression of the Cricket Australia announcement?
Go on then.
La 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 la, coronavirus isn't happening, la 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 la.
It was a bit strange, wasn't it? Because for weeks we've been hearing from Cricket Australia, there's going to be dramatic cuts, and people are going to have to make job cuts, and that I think that they'd said we're going to have to slash our budget by 25%, and it was a bit weird because from our perspective, their season had just ended when coronavirus struck, and it was meant to be their off season anyway, and now they've essentially said, well, as of September when our season starts, everything's going to be normal. So for the women, that means that they'll be playing New Zealand in September, October, and then India in January 2021. And the men's schedule is basically going to all go ahead according to this. And they've also, in their press release, basically said, oh yeah, and fans are going to come back into stadia, and it's all going to be great. And it's all a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Australia have kind of really lucked out here. That they've had the coronavirus the virus has kind of gone through its process in the Australian off season. It's kind of done to Australia the opposite of what it's done to the ECB. So it's taken out a huge chunk of the ECB's season, and probably realistically some bits of the season have been taken out entirely. Whereas it's possible that for Australia, that they will be bringing cricket back just at the point that the world's coming out of its lockdown, and that everything goes swimmingly, and that they remain largely unaffected by it. So, and if they're fortunate enough that happens, then that's great for them. But there are still some challenges, aren't there, Raf? And, you've been on another conference, video conference this week with people from BASIS, the British Association for Sustainable Sport.
Yeah.
Let's get that right. And people have been talking about the challenges of getting fans back into the stadium, haven't they? And you heard from someone that works at the Emirates Stadium where Arsenal play in London. What did they have to say about these challenges?
Well, it was very much in contrast with what we've heard from Cricket Australia, really, who were talking, very optimistically about being able to fully reopen stadia. And what we heard on that BASIS call was actually from 3 separate people who work at big stadia in the UK. One of them from a rugby stadium, one of them from the Emirates, as you said, in London, and one of them from a first-class cricket county stadium, quite a big one. And that essentially all of them were quite pessimistic about this idea of just being able to reopen to the public. And obviously because it was partly themed around sustainability, they were saying that actually it's not necessarily very sustainable economically to open up your entire stadium just for a few people to come in. So from the cricket stadia, they were kind of saying, well, actually, in a normal season we open up for first class men's county championship matches, which go for 4 days, and we have only 500 people coming in. Which is probably the kind of model that people are maybe looking at now in the wake of coronavirus. But that counterbalances, so obviously then they make a loss by opening up the stadia for those matches. But then that counterbalances by the international matches and the T20 men's T20 matches that they're able to host. So they can kind of balance the books that way. But if you always know that by opening your stadia you're only going to get a very small number of people, then that presents its own challenge economically. So the implications of what was being said actually are that matches whereby you think you're going to attract not very many people, and matches and where you think it's going to be impossible to get a full kind of capacity crowd in, or even a 75% capacity crowd in, are going to be really difficult, and that they probably won't bother. Because as a business model, it's not very effective.
So just to be clear, what we're talking about here, right, is the idea of getting fans into the stadium.
Yeah.
We're not talking about playing behind closed doors is a different proposition. We're talking about getting fans and even getting them through the turnstiles, right? I understand someone talked about turnstiles.
Yeah, because if you're thinking about if you're thinking about trying to open up a stadium to the public, and even if you can sustain social distancing within the stadium, one of the issues that you've got is how people get in and how people get out as well. But obviously, the turnstiles are one of the pinch points. So this was the guy from the Emirates was kind of saying that actually that's one of the real problems, is how do you do social distancing when everyone's trying to come in, and crucially they're all trying to come in at the same time. So with school reopening in this country, for example, they're talking about having staggered opening times so that not all the pupils are coming in at exactly the same time, and that's fine with schooling. But with a live sporting match, you can't really expect half the crowd you can't really expect the crowd to come in that kind of segmented way, because they all need to be there for the same time. So that's problematic. I guess the other thing for someone like the Emirates is that about 70% of their fans or their crowds travel by public transport, and there's very limited parking around the stadium. You can't just say to everyone, oh no, you can't come by public transport. It's not sustainable. And actually, ironically, a model for that stadium that previously had been seen to be really good and really environmental because everyone's coming by public transport is now, the epitome of evil in the time of coronavirus because public transport's terrible. And So there's all kinds of issues with opening up these big stadia, and actually it does therefore seem like Cricket Australia just kind of, as you said, they're putting their hands over their ears and just going, oh, everything's fine, and being very over optimistic.
Okay, but we're still definitely hopeful that we'll be able to get some sport on in terms of playing behind empty stadiums. We've had some more information this week from the UK government, haven't we, about playing or bringing back live sport, and some live sport even starting as early as this week. We've got horse racing back on this week. Horse racing, of course, is in the UK, for those who don't know, is a huge money sport because horse racing is funded by the gambling industry. So there's a lot of money there and a lot of pressure to get that back on. Snooker, I believe, is starting tomorrow. So if you're a snooker fan, then line up your reds and your whites.
Why is it the most boring sports that get to restart first?
I don't know, Raf. And then men's professional football is starting again in the middle of this month. But the ECB this week have said that they're definitely not going to start anything until the 1st of August.
That's domestic cricket. So let's be clear about this. So what we've heard this week are kind of plans from the ECB about international cricket, but also they've said that the domestic season is definitely not going to start until the 1st of August. And we have heard that the men are now back training, and that the women are definitely returning to training on the 22nd of June. There's meant to be this test series, the men's test series, starting against the West Indies in July. And then from the women's perspective, the idea is that probably still not until August or September they have this tri-series against South Africa and India. And there was actually an article in the Times this week by Lizzie Amon suggesting that might be a 50-over series, which seems interesting. What do you make of that, Syd?
Well, obviously the incentive to play a 50-over series is that there is, in theory, a 50-over World Cup coming up. And they want to get some 50-over cricket in. I think if I was running the show, I might be looking to T20 as kind of a more attractive version of the sport to try and put in front of broadcasters. And a T20 tri-series could be an exciting thing. And there's also one small consideration, which is that the BBC have got rights to one T20 match in the season, one women's international T20 match. How cool would it be if that one match was the final of a tri-series featuring South Africa and India and England?
Yeah, I mean...
Providing England got to the final, of course.
Be,
which is no guarantee with that. Those are good sides.
It's true. I mean, it could be good. I just wonder... I think that would be really interesting to see how that plays out with... because presumably, if there's only a limited number of women's matches going on, then Sky might say, well, we haven't had our full quota of matches, so we want to screen that final. So there could be a bit of a battle going on between Sky and the BBC over that tri-series final.
Sky versus BBC punch-up. Maybe they could have a game of PlayStation cricket to decide who got it, like between the head producer at Sky and the head producer at the BBC. Just a suggestion, guys. You could screen it. I don't know who would have the rights to screen that under those circumstances. That might be awkward.
Anyway, you hinted at this with what you were rambling on about horse racing and snooker before, which is that the UK government has actually finally published some guidelines for the resumption of sport, and some of those guidelines do relate to cricket, don't they? So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I read the guidelines, so you don't have to. Did you read them, Raf, after you had a go at me last week?
I didn't have a go at you. I just pointed out that you hadn't done your research properly.
Sounded like having a go at me to me, Raf.
It's 12 weeks of being in lockdown finally getting to us.
No, I read through the guidelines. The guidelines, they look good. They're definitely focused on the idea of getting the sport on. I think that there's definitely an argument to be made that they're a bit too permissive in that regard. That the focus is on how can we get sport on rather than how can we 100% protect people from coronavirus. But perhaps it's not really realistic to do that going forwards, and we need to get the sport back on. We need to, get things moving again for everybody's sake. Everybody wants that, and it would be great if that could come out. So what the guidelines say is that you can proceed with elite level sport, providing you follow a series of strategies, and those strategies are again reasonably open, and there's a lot of flexibility built into them. So you raised the question last week regarding the ICC's guidance about travel to matches and how players themselves travel to matches. And what the guidance says is that you need to try and ensure that players are travelling by themselves in their own cars, so that there's not the opportunity for the spread of the virus there. But it doesn't say you absolutely have to. It's permissive in that regard. Another interesting thing is on the testing. It says that what you need to do when players arrive at the sporting venue is that they need to be screened. But there's something really important there. They need to be screened, not tested. And there's a very different procedure in terms of that, because a test is a full medical test which will go 100%. Have you on perhaps within a margin of error, it will say have you got the virus or not, whereas a screening procedure can be like have you got a high temperature, have you got a cough, etc. And that means that it's realistic. If the government had said we need to test, then that at that point becomes completely unrealistic to run something like a women's COE competition, because just the cost of the test, these tests cost £100 a shot when you buy them privately, and that's just not realistic that the system is going to pay for that, whereas a screening procedure is easier to work with and more cost effective. So within those guidelines, it's definitely possible that we could get the Centres of Excellence competition on, and I think that that's good news, and I feel a little bit more optimistic that we might see some elite level cricket there. If you're a player out there watching this, that a club player and things, then I'm afraid the news is probably slightly less good in that regard, really, because what the government are focusing on is getting the elite level sport back, and the news is slightly less good if you're hoping to actually play some cricket as a club player or whatever. That it's further down the queue, unfortunately. But there's still a possibility that could happen in September as well, as the government move into this new phase of the virus crisis, and as they try and get the country back to some sort of normality. So I've got my fingers crossed that we might see some domestic cricket on this basis this year.
Great. And we ran a poll about the new retainer system, didn't we? And about to what extent that's being communicated with the players, because the retainers are meant to be kicking in tomorrow, Monday the 1st of June. And we wondered whether the regional directors had managed to establish contact with all those players yet, on the basis that the Centre of Excellence competition will go ahead as anticipated in September, as you've just said. So what were the results of that poll, Syd?
Well, we had 20-something responses that suggested people had been contacted, which is the number we were expecting. So that suggests that the retainers have been brought in, they're in place just as the ECB said they would be, and that those players are moving on to that programme. So I'm sure they're all looking forward to their strength and conditioning and their personalised beat tests and all that kind of thing, I'm sure no one will be regretting getting on the programme after that.
Great. Well, it's good to hear that people are actually being contacted, and then that process is kind of the wheels are in motion, really, because I think it was quite a tight turnaround between actually announcing the retainers and then having to roll them out. And given the pre-existing delays there's been to all the regional centres of excellence stuff happening, that seems like a good thing. We'd previously heard that the contracts were meant to be starting in April, in May, etc., and even pre-coronavirus there seemed to be plenty of delays. So this new aspect is particularly vital for a number of domestic players. So it's really good that we've had those responses that indicate that there's been some positive communication. So let's hope that will go smoothly, and that kind of goes some way towards meeting some of these player concerns that had previously been expressed. Right, I think that's about it for this week. We'll see you in a week's time. Stay safe, stay well, and see you in a week.